Let me tell you about a quest that began over 20 years ago, a quest to rebuild a certain video game. One that some would say has not yet ended, but for me it has. I'm satisfied with what's been released in the last couple of years, and I actually don't dare hope for something better anymore. It is the quest to give the world a new Master of Magic. The gaming industry goes through phases, especially when it comes to the what shall we make today that's a lot like something that was released a couple of years ago. We've just exited the space exploration phase. We have Star Citizen development, Elite has been launched, there's Everspace, there's some other things, and there's the No Man's Sky debacle. There was the old school RPG that actually gave us some really awesome RPGs, like Divinity Original Sin, Pillars, if it weren't so intent on being incredibly well balanced and something. Go to RPG Codex and you'll know what I'm talking about. And before those, a long time before those actually, even before the Kickstarter craze, there was the trend to rebuild Master of Magic. A lot of people have tried. Stardock has tried with Elemental War of Magic, the original version of which was kinda not very good. They patched it and they gave everyone that bought the game the sequel for free. And by the way, if you're playing, I'm not sure if it was in War of Magic or if it was in Fallen Enchantress, there is an actual spell in that game that I designed, that I got to put in that game. It's called Shadow World, and it summons a portal that just spawns demons non-stop. That's my contribution to video games. Good night, everybody. After that, Paradox released the Warlock games. Those, I wouldn't call them charlatans from Wasteland Interactive, tried to make their own game and it kinda sucked. I'm not calling them charlatans, I'm just saying that Erases Pacific, had it been launched today, it would have eclipsed No Man's Sky in terms of lies. And then the people at Triumph actually made their best effort to finalize their own series. The Age of Wonders series, thanks to Notch, he funded it, and made Age of Wonders 3, which is probably the best in the series, the most complete. It's still not at the same level of breadth as Master of Magic, but it's close. And for me, those games are enough. Well, not the Wasteland one, but the rest of them are enough. I can say that I'm satisfied with these games, with the genre. It's over. Probably, maybe in 10 years, someone will pick up the torch again and try to make a new one. And until then, I still have the original, unblemished, bug-ridden, highly complex, not very well balanced, and in some aspects quite insane Master of Magic.
Old man, you seek the spell of mastery.
Why have people been trying to replicate this game for 20 years? Not because of the original version. Master of Magic 1.0 crashed like hell and had so many bugs in it that people had to wait about 1 or almost 2 years for an actual version that worked properly. And mind you, this was before the internet was actually a thing, so you had to find someone that had the internet and had a floppy disk drive and you could copy that floppy, the patch I mean. And yet, it did get fixed. To those who haven't played it, the best way I can describe it would be, imagine if Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines had actually been fixed by its developer. Yeah, I know this would require you to have played Bloodlines, which you should have by now, but it's the same basic idea. This game rocked. Yeah, again, it was not very well balanced, some things were just OP, some things just seemed to be superfluous, and yet when you put them all together, you got an awesome gaming experience. This was Civilization, where you could play as an insane, godly, almighty sorcerer tyrant. Or, you know, one of those benevolent, turn ashes into food to feed your people type of sorcerers, wizards that sing some bob. The basic idea was that you began by choosing your wizard. You could pick from a few pre-made ones, like there was Merlin, there was Tauron, there was whatever that guy's name that was Death. There were a lot of characters, and each of them had certain characteristics. One of them would be a Chaos Master, another one would have been a Druid, or a Voodoo something, or an Archmage, which gave them several bonuses in certain areas. And you also had spellbooks. You could choose how many spellbooks of each type you had in a certain limit. And those spells were the Chaos, Life, Death, Nature, the blue one. Those affected what spells, what actual incantations you could research during your game. And those would affect so many things because this game had a lot of spells. And when I say it had a lot of spells, I mean it had a buttload of spells. Yes, buttload is a scientific term used to describe a quantity that is between a heck of a lot and a crap ton. Now, certainly some of them weren't that useful. Like, let's say you cast chaos channels on your best hero, on your champion, to give him demonic wings that let him fly, and then to, you know, protect your cities from the evil forces coming from without, you would cast Chaos Ward on one of your cities, you know, to protect it, to prevent any chaos creature from even entering. And then you got attacked by an army of earth elementals, and when you try to get your ungodly powerful hero into your town to guard it, well, what do you know? He's a chaos creature because you gave him demonic wings. Oh boy, that's... You get to learn that the spells, even though they may seem pointless at times, they do have a point, they do have a use. Even if it's one of the most insignificant things possible, or if it's Cracked Skull, which can utterly kill anything. Well, there's a chance it can utterly kill anything, but anything it kills cannot be resurrected because practically they're not dead. Cracked Skull just opens a hole in the ground and they fall through it. And they keep falling through it, and they don't stop falling through it. And besides combat spells and spells that would let you enhance or guard your city, you also had overland enchantments that would give you several bonuses, like being able to see anything, or giving your units more experience. And if you had the Warlord perk that already did that by default, you would gain access to a new secret, otherwise unattainable level of experience for your units. They were, what were they, Champion? Super Elite? Yeah, I think it was Super Elite or something. You could have a lot of fun with those spells. And I mean a lot of fun. You could even terraform. You could turn a mountain into a hill. You could turn a mountain later on into a volcano. Well, sure, you couldn't do most of the terraforming in one go. You had to change one type of terrain into another type, and then into another type, and so on. You could even turn eventually a desert into a sprawling oasis, a Garden of Eden. Sure, you'd lose the bonuses that the desert gave. I can't actually remember what the bonuses were, but each tile offered it. Again, it was like Civilization. Each tile where you build your city offered a different bonus, especially those that had resources on them like mithril, adamantium, silver, gold, or a river, you know, for that trade. And the race you controlled itself would also give more bonuses to those resources, because apart from picking your wizard, you also picked a sort of civilization to rule. A people. You could be a nomad, you could be a high elf, you could be a high man, you could be a dark elf, you could be a draconian, you could be even one of those worthless clacons. You recognize that name, don't you? The clacons. Even if you didn't play Master of Magic ever, you recognize that name. You recognize it even now because you've probably played something recent. Especially if you're a fan of 4X strategy games, space strategy games, You recognize that name, the Clicons. They are from Master of Orion. Why? Because Master of Magic is made by the same people that made Master of Orion, the studio Simtex. And it was designed by the same person that made Master of Orion, Steve Barcia. But rather than being just Master of Orion with fantasy elements, Master of Magic was the evolution that is responsible right now for Master of Orion existing. I'm not joking. Go play Master of Orion 1, then go play Master of Orion 2. They are very different games. They handle things so incredibly different you could not actually deduce that they're part of the same series. Master of Magic, however, you can trace a direct line. You can see a direct connection between it and Master of Orion 2. The heroes, the buildings, the settlements, diplomacy, everything is an evolution from Master of Magic. Fundamentally, they still are very different games. I mean, in Master of Magic, you ran around the world, well, two worlds actually. There was Meran and Arcanus that you could travel between using towers or spells. You ran around those worlds collecting, well, not collecting, but taking over power nodes. You would place a spirit. You would bind that spirit on a node of power, and that node would generate power for you. It would generate mana, and you would use that mana to cast spells or, do something else, or you could just focus entirely on having an army because you did not have an actual tech tree, you had a build tree. If you build a building, you unlock the next one, and so on until you had every building possible. There was no limitation on what you could build from the get-go. You didn't have to discover ironworking, you didn't have to discover enchanting, you did not have to discover cavalry. You just build those buildings until you got to the cavalry. Now, it's certainly some factions had Pegasus or Pegasus horses with wings or unicorns instead of just boring old cavalry, but still, you had it with no research required. That research was just spent on spells that could summon unicorns and Pegasuses and demons and the undead. And oh yeah, a volcano right next to the enemy city. No, actually, no. A volcano would actually be one of the least destructive things you could do. You could summon the apocalypse. You could summon volcanoes randomly on each turn everywhere on the map. You could blight the earth until it became infertile. You could destroy this world on the level of... graphically it changed a tiny bit, and statistically it did change significantly. Or you could cast a spell of making, I believe that's what it was called, which just made you God. But when you started casting it, the other wizards would try and kill you. Though to be fair, they would try and kill you most of the time anyway. What I initially liked about the diplomacy of the game was that you had more options when dealing with your opponents. You could give them gifts, you could exchange spells, and they would remember that. When it came time to form an alliance, to form a treaty, they would actually say that, you seem like a shifty bastard, but hey, you did give me that spell that let me create this +10 sword of holy smiting your ass if you turn on me, or this +10 armor of anti-backstabbing you bastard, which I just equipped to my hero. So yeah, we're cool, yeah, let's form an alliance. Now sure, because wizards are basically bastards in this game, they are bastards. They will eventually backstab you. I don't actually believe I ever won a game of Master of Magic using diplomacy. I'm not even sure if it's possible. I've killed them, and sometimes they can come back if you don't destroy every bit of their civilization. If you just destroy their tower, they will come back after a while, because they're demigods. But for the most part, the way that the diplomacy made you feel like it was trying to be real was part of the magic of the game. The feeling that, yeah, you were in a world that you shaped, that you controlled, that you were actively trying to destroy, it would seem, by unleashing hordes of undead. There was a spell for unleashing hordes of undead, by the way. That's sort of where I got the idea for Shadow World. And as you can see on the background, the game also had tactical combat. The units, they seem small, and those dragons look so lumpy, so chubby, so cute. But let me tell you, when that Sky Drake uses a breath weapon on your hero that's kinda weak against breath weapons because you didn't have the luck of rolling one of those perks. Heroes had perks too, like I said, it was insanely complex at the point that gave them ungodly resistance to magic. Yeah, they would probably die. The combat, well, I enjoyed it, but it was simplistic. You move your units one after another, there was no real tactical element to it. You could cast spells in combat and that would really help you. That was where the tactics would sometimes intervene because you had a limited number of spells you could cast in combat based on your skill, on the amount of mana that you set aside to be cast to be used in each combat instance. So you could go for a big spell, one of those big whammies that would just maybe pulverize the enemy if they didn't roll high enough on resistance. It was a D&D-ish game in the way that the statistics were calculated, so you had shields, you had swords, and those represented your dice, kind of. And if the enemy did roll high on resistance, yeah, you just wasted that big ass spell, but hey, you could have summoned the fire elemental. That could have helped, or you could have summoned the tornado that randomly goes in 2 or 3 directions it wants to and then lets you choose one direction. Tactics in combat usually involved exactly what units you had. Like if you had spellcasters that could also cast their own spells with their own mana, if you had some infantry or some cavalry that could take the brunt of the attack and shield those warlocks, if you had slingers, if you had those dwarven hammer hand guys that could just be completely OP. Or you could pair them with werewolves, but not in some versions of the game because the lycanthropy spell would sometimes cause the game to get stuck. Like not even crash, just get stuck, and it was very annoying. The game gave you options. It gave you an insane amount of options. Granted, not every one of them was a winner. Not every one of them was the perfect choice that would instantly win any confrontation. I'm sure there were some of them, because, well, how should I put this? If I remember right, the guide, well, one of the guides I read about this game about a lot of years ago had about 100 pages, and that's something the community wrote, like maybe 1 or 2 people wrote. It was a gigantic FAQ from the ancient DLH days. I believe DLH is still around, but no one uses it. It was a guide so complex that it just showed you every spell, what value it had, every unit, how useful it would be. It was insanely in-depth, which made sense when you looked at the manual of the game and saw that it was roughly about also 100 pages. And the best part is you can pick this up and play it without the manual. The interface, the way the game is made, actually is quite intuitive. If you've played Civilization 1, you will understand this game with no problem. It even had tooltips, if I'm not mistaken. It would show you things, it would give you information. It was easy to pick up and play. And it was compelling as well because it wasn't just about building armies and fighting against the enemy civilizations, the enemy sorcerers. It also had a sense of exploration, that you were in a D&D-ish world, that you were in a fantasy RPG setting, and you could send your heroes, your armies, to go into a tower, to go into a dungeon, have a fight, get some treasure, get some loot, get some research, get a new spell from there. It gave you a plethora of ways you could enjoy yourself in it. And that's what made it stick. That's what made it stand out compared to, well, I was gonna say every other game of the type, but there weren't actually that many other games of this type. Yeah, you could say that there was Heroes, but Heroes had a very different way it handled the economy and you couldn't build castles. There was the Warlord series as well, which I honestly remember playing, not Battlecry, but the original Warlord. I remember playing it and not much else of it, and it endured. Master of Magic endured. People forgot how bad it was when it was first released, and then they just began to enjoy it more and more and more as time went on. And they were itching for a sequel. But when the time for a sequel did come, it was decided to give Master of Orion a sequel instead of to give one to Master of Magic, and Simtex made Master of Orion to one of the best 4X space games ever made. And it was built on the foundation of Master of Magic. It existed because of Master of Magic. And then years later, there did come the news that Master of Magic 2 would also be made. And it was gonna be insane. Instead of just 2 parallel worlds, it would have about 5 of them. No wait, there were 6 of them. And instead of just 5 types of magic, there would be 13. But well, you know, things change. The series was taken over by Atari, who did Master of Orion 3, the one that people never talk about. And then hope fizzled for a true sequel, and the quest started. Age of Wonders came along, Dominions came along, a lot of similar games started to pop up. Stardock actually tried to get the series from Atari but failed, so instead they made their own game. They made Elemental War of Magic, and now we're back where we started. I encourage you to go and play Master of Magic whenever you feel like it. It's available on GOG for €5.40, and it is a great game to play. Sure, it may not be a looker, but my god, was it fun. Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.